Hey folks, this is Warwolf howling out at you. This is actually my second time doing this video because somebody decided to call in the midst of my original recording, and I don't know how to actually merge files on OBS. I hate when that shit happens. Anyway, I'm here to talk to you today about what is probably going to be considered a controversial, quote unquote, take on unions. Now, before anybody says anything, I am not against the idea of people being able to have a certain amount of control in their relationship with their employers. But they shouldn't have total control of the relationship with their employers because it's a severe power imbalance. And nowhere is this more apparent than what I've seen in recent years. Now, when I was younger, I didn't give a damn about strikes or unions or whatever because I didn't know about them. I watched TV, I watched, whatever interested me, and that was it. As I've gotten into the creative side of things myself as a writer, I've come to realize that unions are not as noble as they make themselves out to be. At one point, I think they absolutely were, but these days, they really aren't. I wish I could remember the name of the episode and so this way I could give you the specific episode and this way you could look it up. But there was an episode of The Simpsons in which Montgomery Burns has a flashback to his father firing somebody from a company that he owned, and that individual then complaining about being fired and then threatening to form a union for collective bargaining, and then admitted that at one point they were going to start going too far and become greedy and overstep themselves. I believe we're at that period of the existence of unions in the modern day. I think we've seen that in my lifetime. Now, this is primarily dealing with the Hollywood strikes, admittedly, but one thing that I can say is that there is a recent example that I did see of a video clip played on, again, this was Fox Business, I think, a company called Yellow, which was a transportation company for like cargo shipping or whatever. They have a union that went and called for a strike for that company, and they got what they wanted in the contract, but literally 3 days later or thereabouts, the company was forced to go into bankruptcy, and the people that were supposed to benefit from this strike instead lost their jobs, their insurance, their medical, everything that was tied into their jobs went out the window, including, most especially, their paychecks. Sean O'Brien, who was the president of that particular union, or at least a representative of that particular union, was brought onto Fox Business, and he was asked point blank, do you regret the fact that these people lost their jobs as a result of the actions of your strike? And his response, now I'm paraphrasing for the most part here, but the one thing he did say verbatim was, no, I do not. So let me put that into perspective. A union caused a company to go out of business, thus costing the people they claim to represent their livelihoods, their insurance, and their paychecks. And the leader of that union's response to, do you regret the fact that you basically harm these people financially, is, no, I don't. The reason I bring this up is because this is what I'm seeing in a lot of the entertainment industry. We saw it with the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes back in 2023. We're seeing it again with the whole voice actors gaming strike this year. These companies that deal with these unions are really in a severe power imbalance with the unions, because the unions can do whatever they want. They can run roughshod, and they don't care who is negatively impacted by their actions, so long as they, quote unquote, win at the bargaining table, which is kind of a misnomer in the first place, because there's no actual bargaining going on here. It's one side making extreme demands and basically going, we're going to make everybody else suffer for you not giving us what we want, but then we're going to tell people that they should be mad at you because how dare anybody hold us accountable for impacting the lives of people who aren't even part of the union. This is what a union does, at least in the entertainment industry, and presumably in other industries as well. There are roughly 28 states in the United States where if you are a union member and you've gotten a company to become fully union, those companies can't even hire people who aren't part of the union. All right, they have to be part of the collective bargaining of the union, even if, they don't want to be, which is complete crap. But this is what we've seen done over the years. This is why I'm very happy to see the defeat of a union at the Supreme Court level. It very rarely happens. In fact, I can only think of 2 cases where it's happened that I'm aware of. One was literally a case that said unions cannot force you to pay into their coffers if you don't want to be part of their union. The other one is a more recent one, and that was the whole thing with the, I forget the name of the company, but it was a company that made concrete. And this particular Teamsters group got taken to court because they had deliberately done damage to this company's property. They thought they were going to be protected by the National Labor Relations Board. In fact, they were counting on it. They were literally saying to every member of their union, oh, don't worry about it. We'll be completely protected. We've got the instant win button. Because that's literally what the National Labor Relations Board is. It's an instant win button for the unions. They very rarely ever side against the unions in anything that happens. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard of it happening. So, there you go. The fact that the Supreme Court said, if you deliberately cause damage, which this is in the law anyway, you cannot rely on the NLRB to save you from accountability. So again, I was very happy to see that happen. Now, the Hollywood strikes, thank God, did not result in property damage or physical injury to anybody else. What they did do, however, was pretty much condemn their own members to less work. Now, what do I mean by that? The 2020, I believe it's the 2023 strikes. These literally did severe damage to their own industry, but they don't care because, oh, look, we got all this stuff in the contracts. But who actually got to benefit? And the answer is not as many people as they would want you to believe. Now, I used to be on Reddit, and in fact, actually, I got banned from a subreddit specifically for screenwriting for pointing out something that should have been directly obvious. The strikes were going to cause harm to the people in the unions. Because if the studios gave in to what the unions wanted, then the studios weren't going to be able to make as many things, and therefore not as many people were going to be hired to do writing or acting or what have you in new and upcoming projects. And some projects that were already in the pipeline might get canceled. Or if they were already in production, that might be all you would get. And that turned out to be right. And when I pointed this out to them, all they did was whine and complain, call me awful and crazy, and then ran off to the people in charge of Reddit and complained about it. For literally just pointing out that the very thing I had said was going to happen happened. Okay, whatever. At this point, I personally do not like Reddit anyway. They banned me under false pretenses, not just from Reddit, but from that particular subreddit, but from Reddit itself. So as far as I'm concerned, they can go take a long walk off a short pier, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so what happened with the union strikes? Well, they claimed they won this, that, and the other thing, and maybe they did, but the very thing I predicted, in fact, even Clownfish TV predicted this, people were going to suffer the consequences of the union strike. Not because there was any kind of retaliation, but because the studios took one look at their finances, took one look at the demands that the union was making, and said, okay, we'll give you what you want, but we're going to scale back immensely on product, meaning that there's going to be less people working. And the unions don't care. The unions touted it as a win. They said, we won, we got all these things for you. But how many of the people that they claimed that they were representing actually got to benefit? And the answer is, again, not as many as you think. Look at the amount of things that were being put out prior to the 2023, 2024, whatever the hell it was, writer's strike and actors strike that were going on. They were almost like within like 2 months of each other, I think they started. I forget if it was SAG-AFTRA that started and then WGA began, or maybe it's the other way around. And then we just had the whole thing with the IATSE strike. All that they did was harm people who weren't even involved in their particular field of work, who weren't part of the actors union or the writers union or whatever. And then, once everybody went back to work, production got scaled back. And the union's like, well, we won. But people lost their jobs because of it. Not because of retaliation, but because they can't really afford to do more than a certain amount of productions now. So there's less people getting hired as writers. There's less people getting hired as actors. There's less people getting hired for whatever the hell it is that IATSE does, or IATSE does. I don't even know how to pronounce it. The unions tout this as a win. But they don't care about the people they claim to represent. I've said this to some people that I know online, and I'm going to say it here. I don't see unions as unions anymore. I see them as basically corporations. In fact, I'll go a step further. I see them as the mafia. Because everything they do basically it's a protection racket. It's like, hey, this is a great business you got here. Shame if something happened to it. Like, oh, I don't know, all the workers going on strike because we told them they're being treated unfairly. Okay, so you tell the workers this, they go on strike, you get what you claim you want in the contracts, but they're the ones who suffer. And they don't even have the option not to be involved in the collective bargaining process in 28 states. 28 states force you to be part of the union's collective bargaining, even if you just want to have a direct relationship with your boss. You can't do it in 28 states. That's god-awful. Because that means you suffer from something that the union might do, and they won't care if you end up being put out of work, as long as they, quote-unquote, win. And let's be honest, they don't actually bargain. They make demands. All right? And they say, oh, the studio, the bosses, they didn't immediately cave into our demands. Therefore, they must be bad people. So, let me see if I got this straight. You decide to go asking for more money, more this, more that, at a time when the studios are in financial straits. Right? All right, so bear with me on this one. You do that. You get, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months, whatever the hell it was that the strikes went. And then you claim you get all this great stuff in the contracts. But again, who benefits? Not the workers who lost their jobs. And there were people who lost their jobs in Hollywood as the result of these strikes. Less productions being greenlit means less people working. That means less writers, less actors, less everything. And the people who weren't even part of the writers and actors unions, they suffered because they were out of work. They weren't making money. They weren't able to put food on their table. They weren't able to feed their children. But we have to support the unions, right? Well, again, there's nothing wrong with a certain amount of collective bargaining. I will not say that there's something necessarily wrong with that. Unfortunately, unions are no longer in the position where they're doing anything good. They're just, saying, oh, hey, strike. Oh, look how much we got. Oh, we don't care if you ended up without a work. We got ours. And that's what the unions are really all about these days. They don't care about the workers that they claim to represent because they don't care if people lose their jobs as a result of the changes they demanded in union contracts. Because if work gets scaled back, they don't care. They still get their money and they can still take it to the bank. Is there a way for there to be a more balanced relationship between workers and unions? Yeah, I think so. But this country will never let it happen because we are so left-wing that we have literally made it next to impossible for the employers to actually have a way to have a true balance in the relationship between themselves and their employees. Because the unions, again, they're basically the mafia, and they're basically a government-approved mafia. They can do whatever the hell they want, and the people who provide the jobs can't say or do a damn thing, otherwise they're on the hook legally. Like I said, that's why I was very happy to see a union actually be held accountable by the Supreme Court. Literally 8 justices. There was only one individual who was dumb enough to say unions should be untouchable. They shouldn't be held accountable when they do something wrong. And again, that's Ketanji Brown Jackson, folks. Yes, she is the one individual who said unions should have all the power. They should never be held accountable. And how dare anybody think that, the people that employ the individuals that the unions claim to represent should ever have any ability to have some kind of actual power in the relationship between themselves and the unions. Now, again, I don't think you're ever going to see too much of any kind of behavior like what happened with the Seattle Cement Company and the union that, again, these were the guys that got sued at the Supreme Court level. Because, again, this is true. Unions always win because of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. Even if they are blatantly in the wrong, the NLRB will side with them. No matter what, because they don't believe in union accountability. Doesn't matter what they do. This is, in fact, what that Seattle union was banking on when they decided to go on strike in the middle of a workday while they were actually already on the job, thus deliberately causing damage and loss of property to the cement company. That was, by the way, the only reason why I think that the justices actually sided with the company, because the union had deliberately done something wrong, and we know that the union was expecting the NLRB to basically just say, "Oh, go play. We're not going to hold you accountable." The Hollywood unions are in the same situation. Now, not in the sense that they've caused damage, but they have bullied people. For example, I think it was Drew Barrymore. Literally was doing a show during the strike. She wasn't violating any of the strike's rules or anything. She wasn't even one of the ones being struck, as far as I know, either way. But they still tried to bully her into shutting her show down again. So this is what a union does. They're a mafia. in a lot of ways. And they don't care what happens to you. They care about whether or not they can, quote unquote, win at the, quote unquote, bargaining table. And I say bargaining in air quotes because, again, you're not actually bargaining. You're not giving anything up. And before anybody says it, because I know somebody's going to say this in the comments, oh, but they're giving something up. They're giving up productive work. Yeah, congratulations. You're literally just going back to doing what you were doing. You're not giving any kind of actual concession. You're just making demands and saying, we're going to make everybody else's life miserable until we get what we want, and be damned the consequences, even to the people we claim to represent, as long as we get ours. That is what a union does. At least these days. There may have been a time when they were indeed every bit as noble as they make themselves out to be. That day is not today. So I'm just going to say this straight up. If you have the ability, I think it's called FICOR. If you have the ability to go FICOR, do it. This basically means you get the protections of a union, but you get to set your own rules for how you actually deal with your employer. It also means that the unions cannot bully you, because they will try to bully you into joining the union or whatever have you. Because literally, like I said, there's 28 states where you have to be involved in a union's collective bargaining. Otherwise, you won't get hired. Even if you don't want to be part of the union, you have to, by law, be part of their collective bargaining. Otherwise, you can't have a job in those 28 states. That is the most disgusting thing I think I've heard when it comes to unions. It's gross. It's stupid. It's disgusting. And I'd love to see it get overturned at the Supreme Court level. It won't happen, but I'd love to see it happen. So again, we just had and the other reason why I'm bringing this up is we just had the whole voice actors strike thing. Now, supposedly, the big complaint that was going on with the voice actor strike was we want protections against AI. Now, I'm a writer. I don't use AI myself. I've seen videos of AI in action. As far as I can understand, from my personal viewpoint of things, as a writer, I feel like I'm safe because no matter how advanced the AI is in our lifetime, maybe like a couple of 100 years from now, maybe I'd be worried. But in the modern day, you're not going to find an artificial intelligence that has the ability to create true emotional depth in the writing field. Now, I can understand why people are worried about stuff like being able to generate images or even video with AI because, like, oh, that's going to impact us. I can understand that. But the problem is that AI is literally just another tool in the creative toolbox, as far as I can tell. You only get out of it what you put into it. Now, I know that Universal and Disney are trying to sue a company called Midjourney, which offers access to their website, which will allow you to create AI images. And I think their big excuse was, well, this AI is so good it can produce really decent artwork of our characters. Congratulations. You've literally just proved that unless you're literally telling the AI that you want something very specific and it misinterprets what you're saying, it will give you what you ask for, but it's only going to give you what you ask for. Congratulations. Now, I know they're saying, oh, but what about, them making potentially now AI-generated videos? Okay. Again, you're only going to get from that video what you put into the AI prompting system, as far as I can understand. So, you only get what you put into it. And again, I don't believe that the studios are complaining about AI because they genuinely want to get rid of AI. They're complaining about AI because they want to monopolize it. And now you have the unions basically complaining, we don't want AI in any aspect of anything that we're involved in. Well, congratulations. You've just given them the exact reason why they want to pursue AI. I have said this before. The more expensive something is, the less people are going to buy it. If you make cigarettes more expensive, less people will buy and smoke cigarettes, I would hope. If you make gasoline more expensive, less people are going to buy gasoline. If you make labor more expensive, regardless of what that labor is, whether it's drawing an image, working on a TV show as an actor, or being a voice actor, people will buy less of it. AI is years, perhaps decades away from being legitimately good enough, I think, to create full-on movies. You might be able to get some kind of like little snippets, I think, maybe, at this point. But congratulations, you're complaining about something that won't happen for decades yet, and yet you're actually causing the studios to have more of a reason to want to look into AI. Because AI doesn't complain. AI doesn't ask for more money. AI doesn't basically say, we want this, 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 and this, and it'd be a real shame if we didn't get it because we'll put all the other people out of work for weeks or months or even years until we get what we want. And then when the people that we claim to represent are harmed by our actions, we don't care because we're just going to laugh all the way to the bank with our money. Unions have the ability to be good. They just haven't been. Here's a good example of that. In order to, quote unquote, stand in solidarity with the union strikes of 2023, Has-Been Hotel, which was supposed to launch in June of 2023, was pushed to January of 2024. From a personal standpoint, it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the show, but it did make liars out of the people who said, that they're going to have this show premiere on this particular date because of the strikes. And how many people actually benefited from the strikes? I'm sure there are a lot who did, but there are a lot more who didn't. And the unions don't care. The unions just want to say that they won, that they got XYZ in the contract, but they don't care how many people get to benefit from that contract. I don't know why I said contract. I don't know what a contract is. Computer tract? I don't know. I have moments where I say weird things sometimes. Anyway, they don't care who actually gets to benefit from those contracts because they get union dues and they get money no matter what happens. So even if you get fired or your workflow basically slows to a trickle or dries up altogether and you're out on the unemployment line, they don't care. They still get money. This is what a union is. They don't care. They still get money. And you may not. So how do we balance the scales? How do we make it so that the unions can't just demand, and then walk off with their money once they've got what they want and leave you holding the bag? Well, I think for one thing, we should try to see about rebalancing, well, quite literally, the balance of power between unions and the employers. Unions bank on the fact that they can get away with virtually anything shy of actual criminal behavior. In fact, they even think they can get away with criminal behavior. Remember what happened with the Seattle Cement Company. Their whole belief was, we're going to get away with this scot-free because the National Labor Relations Board won't even give us so much as a slap on the wrist because we'll just say, oh, but we were striking, therefore it's okay. Even though we literally called the strike in the middle of the work, knowing that the property of the company was going to be damaged, was going to be lost, and in some cases was going to be a combination of lost and caused damage. This is flagrant damaging of property. Thank God it didn't lead to anybody being injured, but you get the idea. And they still expected to get away with it because they don't ever expect to be held accountable for their actions. Because unfortunately, we in this country, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is true in the United Kingdom as well, but here in the United States, it pretty much is true. Unions can get away with anything short of murder at this point. They can do whatever the hell they want. If anything gets lost, damaged, or harmed as a result of their actions because they claimed they were doing that it was the result of a strike, they can get away with anything. Again, short of basically causing physical harm to another person, they can do whatever the hell they want and never once have to worry about the consequences. They are a mafia. They can do what they want. They suffer no consequences, and any suggestion that they should ever be held accountable is treated as if, oh God, you're killing the workers by suggesting that unions be given accountability. I'm sorry, no. We're asking for the unions to start bargaining in good faith and to actually start bargaining, to actually start giving something up. I'm sorry, just saying, well, we're going to end the strike is not a concession. That's literally just you basically going, give us what we want, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how outlandish it is. Otherwise, everybody else who works for you who's not part of the union is going to suffer, is going to lose money, is going to be unable to put food on their table or in their kids' bellies. And we don't care because we're a union. And in 28 states, they can basically force you to be part of their collective bargaining. Otherwise, you can't have a job if that company that you're dealing with is a union company. This is why, again, we need to rebalance the scales. Unions need to have their power curbed. Not necessarily altogether removed, but there needs to be a rebalancing. The employers need to have more control, and they need to be able to say no. And more importantly, the unions need to be held accountable when their actions cause a loss of work for the people that they claim to represent. This has happened with the Hollywood strikes. This has happened with the, again, I forget like the full name of the company. It's like Yellow, I think was the name of the company. It was a trucking company that literally hauled cargo across the country. All right. The union put them out of business, and the union head said he didn't care about the fact that he put this company out of business and the people that were working for that company out of business, including members of the union. His whole thing is, I got mine. I don't care what happened to anybody else who might have been negatively impacted by this. And that's what every union does these days. They don't care about who in their own organizations are negatively impacted so long as they get to say, look at what we won for you in this negotiation. And again, the whole thing with AI, this was the big thing that they just did with Genshin Impact. Now again, full disclosure, I don't play Genshin Impact. I know nothing about it other than the fact that it exists. I'm not even sure if I'd spent more than 5 minutes looking at footage of the damn thing on YouTube. But again, unions do not care if you are negatively impacted by their behavior and their demands on the studio. And you can't do a damn thing about it. You might be negatively impacted. You might be harmed financially by their actions. They don't care. They will never be held accountable, and they do not give a damn if you lose workflow as long as they get to say that they, quote-unquote, won at the, quote-unquote, bargaining table. Which, again, it's not a bargain. Bargain is where you actually have to give something up. You have to, in order for there to be a deal, you have to actually give something up. And I'm sorry, just going back to work is not giving something up. And I'm sorry to say this, we talk about people being called, quote-unquote, scabs. You know, people who will go to work so this way other people can actually, you know, make a living, put food on their table, feed their kids. Yeah, I'm sorry. We need to actually have more of them. Because I'm sorry, this is just coming from me. Now, I'm on SSD. I'm a writer. I set my own hours. I work on my own. If I decide to stop working, if I decide to stop writing, because I write novels, all right? I write novels, I write fan fiction. I have not been published. I am literally not an individual who has been published in the traditional sense. I am not an individual who basically is feeding anybody else. It's just me. If I decide tomorrow that I don't want to be a writer anymore, I'm the only one negatively impacted because I'm giving up something that I happen to find creatively fulfilling. Would I love for that to be financially fulfilling as well? Absolutely. Will that happen? God only knows. But even still, it's just me. If I decide to stop writing tomorrow, nothing of value to anybody else will be lost. Nobody else is going to go into a situation where they can't work because some group is making trouble for everybody else. There's not going to be a situation where somebody out there isn't able to feed their kids or put food on their own table or make money to be able to take care of basic living expenses. Just me. And even then, I'm on SSD. I don't even get paid by anybody else. The only money I make is from them. All right? My business, so to speak, is just being a writer. I am my own manager, my own employee. Now, I'm sure I could argue with myself about this, that, and the other thing, perhaps literally. But in the long run, who am I going to strike against? Myself? One way or another, either I'm going to get back to writing or I'm not. And if I get back to writing, well, big whoop, I'm still not making any money. If I decide not to write, again, big whoop, I'm still not making any money except for what I get from SSD. If I get published and I start making money, congratulations. I still got to make, money to make a living on. But that's not going to happen. Most authors don't make that kind of money. They can't make a living off of this. For every Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, I mean, you name any major author today, and there's not a lot of them who can really say they make a living on their writing. For every one of them, there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people out there who want to be a writer who will never make a living at it, no matter how many books they put out. And congratulations if you find that, amusing. You're probably part of a union and you think you're covered because you're part of the union. Well, guess what? Maybe you are covered. But is everybody you know who's part of that union covered? Do you all reap the benefits of the union contracts? And the answer is, believe it or not, no. You can be put out of business, you can be put out of work by the actions of a union. And they won't care because they only want your money and they want the studio's money and they will laugh all the way to the bank with it. You're worried about AI? As a writer, you really shouldn't be. As somebody who does, art, I could understand why you might be, worried about AI art. But I said this before in my other video. AI is literally doing nothing different from what a regular artist does. It's taught different, positions, anatomy, whatever, by being fed information, and it then generates new things based on the prompts you give it, at least according to what I've seen on videos about the entire issue. That's no different from what a normal artist does. Now, as far as video is concerned, dude, I'm still waiting to see if we ever actually get anything resembling AI video. But if we do get it, the odds are the studios will try to monopolize it and take it away from everybody else so this way they can just make more money off of it. And then you'll have the unions trying to shut them down because now they're not getting money from the studios because the studios can basically make something without necessarily having to be involved with a union. And how much does this actually benefit everybody around all this rigmarole? Virtually none in the long run. It may benefit some people, but they're going to be very few and far between, and they're probably going to be part of the overall organization of the union itself in terms of its hierarchy, not the people that claims to represent. So again, were unions a good thing once? I believe so. Are they a good thing now? I don't think so. I think they could be, but there needs to be a severe redressing of the way unions are allowed to operate, and they need to be able to be held accountable for the actions that they take, and more importantly, the people on the employment side of things, the people on the employer's side of things, need to have more power in this relationship. Otherwise, they're literally at the behest, effectively, of a mafia that couldn't care less about what happens to the people that they claim to represent because they get money either way. And I know, people are going to yell at me in the comments if they see this video at all, and even if they don't, I don't care. This isn't even necessarily for the people out there in YouTube land to see or hear or care about, because most of them probably won't. If you do, hey, great. And if you happen to like this video, again, great. Hit like, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell. You want to yell at me in the comments? Go ahead, yell at me in the goddamn comments. I don't care. Unless your comments are truly offensive, I'll leave them up. But hey, I'm just calling it like it is. Unions were a good thing once. These days, they're the mafia. And they're allowed to operate legally because people think that the unions are a good thing, even though they're arguably worse than the people that they claim to be fighting against in the world of employment, regardless of where it is. Right now, it's Hollywood that is the big, centerpiece of all this. Why? Because the most recent Hollywood strikes have caused harm financially to members of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA because they're not getting as much work as they were because the unions demanded so much that the studios who were in financial straits at the time said, okay, you can have what you want, but we're not making as much stuff anymore. Therefore, you are not going to have as many people that you represent getting beneficiary, responses for this. Yeah, beneficiary responses, I don't know, whatever. The people that the unions say they represent were harmed by these strikes, and they don't care. We got ours! We won! We won! We won! That's what the unions will tell you. But how many of you who ended up losing work, losing jobs, losing job opportunities because the studios basically said we can't afford to do it anymore because of this recent strike and because of the stuff that we were forced to give up to the unions for no actual concessions on their end are out there? And how many of you actually still think that the unions really did anything good for you? I'd love to hear your responses. Like I said, I'm a studio of one. I'm a workforce of one. I'm an employee of myself. If I went on strike against myself, literally nothing would change. If I decide to stop writing tomorrow, nobody but me is negatively affected. If I went on strike tomorrow, I would still get money from the fact that I'm on SSD because I was born with multiple disabilities. If I went on strike tomorrow as a writer, nobody would give a damn. And the fact of the matter is, if I went on strike tomorrow, that by the time I came back, nobody would have actually benefited because there were no benefits to be had. The unions claim that they are getting things for you. But if you end up losing your job because of the things that they say they got for you, was it really worth the trade-off? Let me know in the comments. I'll talk to you later. Bye.